Well, hey everybody, welcome. So glad that you're with us here this weekend, whether you're with us in the room or joining us online, as we have kind of a special weekend where we're going to talk about some family stuff, how you think about family. We talk about it around here, whether it's the family you were born with or the family you've made along the way, kind of your people, and how we might kind of revisit some themes we talked about just a few months ago. But I also want to take just a second to say thank you. You may not necessarily know this if this is your first weekend with us or if you haven't been around the last couple weeks, but I spent a couple weeks talking about where we were as a church financially and just how important the months of November and December are for a church like ours, really for any church in a given year, and the gap that we had found ourselves in. And it has just been absolutely incredible to watch the way that men and women who call Eastern Hills home, how you guys have stepped up and not only given kind of exceptional one-time gifts to help bridge some of that, but also be able to kind of jump on board with giving on a regular basis, which really, I can't tell you how much of a difference that makes around here. It's a really big deal because we can say that we partner with families and we can dedicate them on a weekend, but all the environments and support that, Lord willing, we'll see for the next decade plus, decades to come is really possible because of your generosity. Environment, spaces, events, relationships that we're able to be a conduit for because of you. Even over the course of the last couple of years, as we've watched the needs in our community scale very, very quickly, and to try to meet those needs in really tangible ways through For Aurora with things like Marketplace and our Thanksgiving food drive and our Christmas store. All of those things are made possible at the most basic level because of you. So thank you very much. Thank you for those of you who are still talking in your family and praying about what you might do, how you might get involved. Jesus says that wherever your treasure is, that's where your heart really is. And I know how easy it is for our finances to be kind of the last thing that God gets, but I've said it this way before: until God gets your finances, he doesn't have you. And if you really want God to be at the center of your life, it means that you let him have access to your resources, because as a matter of fact, not just what you give in a place like this, but how you live, every place gets changed because of the hope that we find in how he gives us things for his glory and our contentment. I'm gonna pray for us here in just a second. And if you've never been here before or never heard me speak, I pray kneeling. And do it for lots of reasons, but as we talk about what it means to be families that put God at the center and to put our families first in this life, we need a lot of wisdom, a lot of power, and a lot of perspective from God. Let's ask him to give us that right now. God, thank you so much. Thank you that there is something available to us, that if we walked in feeling exhausted, if we walked in feeling like we're not sure how we're gonna make it through the next month, God, you're with us. If we walked in excited and we walked in hopeful, God, you're with us too. And no matter where we are today, we know that you will take us through the highest highs and the lowest lows if we stay connected to you. I pray that this day would represent a chance to just check back in with one another and with you, that might be how we live our lives this season. It's in Jesus' name, amen. So here's a question for you that you would not probably want to answer on a stage in front of people, but what's your most embarrassing medical story? Now, that's not like sad. We all have some of those probably, but like embarrassing medical story. One you'd be like, well, if I was in your shoes, Phil, I wouldn't want to tell people about it. Here's one of mine. I went for about 10 years, just under a decade, without seeing the dentist. And some of you who have seen me up close, or you're looking really close right now on the screen, you're like, I believe that. And that's a hurtful observation. I just want you to know that that's hurtful. But you know, we know that that's like a thing. We're all supposed to do that. And obviously it was not my best plan. And I had some things to take care of after almost a decade of not going to the dentist. And you'll be glad to know that I am a responsible adult now, and I have since set up the 6-month visits. So for all the dental hygienists in the room, I've set up the 6-month checkups to go and visit a dentist. I actually have one coming up just this week. And I want to give you a tip. If you have been to a dentist and you feel this way, here's a question that every dentist or dental hygienist asks you. They ask you, how often do you floss, right? They ask you that question. And here's what we all know in that moment. There is never a moment in our lives where we feel like more of a child than in that moment. Because I feel like you could answer the dentist, I floss 17 times a day. I think I could say this to my dentist and they would say back, let's just try 20. You know, like let's just see what happens if you try 20 a day. So this is the answer that I give. You can give this to your dentist if it helps shorten the conversation for you. When they say, how often do you floss? I say, not as much as you want me to. That's what I just say, like, we're both disappointed in each other. Neither one of us want to be here. Let's just keep moving, okay? I just think that part. I don't say it out loud. But the reason that we do checkups like this is because if we can stay on top of something, then the problems can be diagnosed early and the solutions are much smaller. But if we let something go for a long time, then all of a sudden we don't have as many options. And today we're gonna do kind of a checkup together. It's not gonna be a bunch of new information, I bet. There's not gonna be something like, even when you go to the doctor, they're not usually like, you know what you should do? You should probably eat a little bit better. You should probably drink more water. You should probably take your like, you know what they're gonna say. It serves as a checkup for you and me. At the beginning of the fall together, we talked about what our focus was gonna be for our year as a community, that in this kind of once in a lifetime opportunity to reset our priorities and our schedules, that we would intentionally aim, collectively and individually, to be God-centered and family first. Whether that's the family that you were born with or the family that you made along the way. And so here we are, just a few months later. How's it going? Isn't it crazy that just a few months later, we are in the eye of the storm headed towards Christmas? This is actually the weekend in our culture that we talk about where we go from I am so thankful for to I must have even more. Like, that's this weekend in our culture. It happens every year. Like, that is where we are currently existing. And it's not just more in your Amazon cart. It's not just more stuff under the tree. It's more on our calendars too. As a matter of fact, over the last couple months, I am now managing my own calendar again for the first time in several years, and I am learning that I'm really bad at it, that just because there's open slots on my calendar doesn't mean I should fill those slots. I'm discovering, please, my wife, do not say amen right now. I am learning this lesson, right? And so for all of us, here's what I hope, that over the next few minutes, I want to give us a little checkup of our hope to be God-centered and family first as a community and for your family. And there's a really good reason why. Because I want us, myself included, to not just dread this season, but to be able to have dreams about it. To be able to think about the hope and the future that exists even over the next few weeks. So for you and me, let's commit to this. Let this season bring your family hope, not hurt. Not the exhaustion of overcommitting, not the regret of overspending, but actually hope. And we're gonna talk about how we might do that together as it relates to our families. And I think it starts with something I'm calling boomerang parenting. Boomerang parenting. Now, when I say boomerang parenting, I wanna make sure you understand, I don't mean that you should throw your kids, okay? That's not what I'm talking about, just so we're on the same page. This term actually came from a conversation that I had with someone who's a part of our community as they were sharing about some of their grown kids that we had been praying for together for years. He talked about how long this path of patience and trust in God had been with them, and he was starting to see God pulling them back to relationship with their Heavenly Father and to him, their loving earthly Father. It was a really helpful picture of a passage that I think sometimes we can pretty easily misinterpret in the Bible that I hope spending just a minute on maybe can help you give yourself some grace and some perspective about your own parenting. Solomon is this guy who writes in the Old Testament or the Hebrew scriptures of the Bible. He's one of the wisest men who ever lived, although he didn't always follow his own advice. And one of these things that he wrote is called the book of Proverbs. And it's written as instructions to a son from a father about the way he might live his life. And in Proverbs chapter 22, he says, train up a child in the way he should go. When he is old, he will not depart from it. Now, this passage has been used and abused to increase guilt and shame on parents, that if your child departs from the path that you've laid out for them or from God, then you must not have raised them well. That isn't what this passage means. And every time we look at or think about a proverb in the Bible, what we have to understand it as is as a principle. It's describing the way that things are supposed to work. Not a promise, the way that things will always work exactly. Not only that the picture of God's faithfulness in our life is a picture that has a much longer time horizon. We want God to fix it immediately. We want it to go our way immediately, but that's not how God works. Maybe for you, this is something that you've kind of started to picture, right? That you realize in your own life, it's not just an up and to the right arc of progress. There are peaks and valleys. There are good days and bad days. There are times where you are crushing it and you're so thankful for the progress that you're experiencing. And there are times where you're so frustrated. And while we understand that for ourselves, for some reason we have a really difficult time applying that to our kids. Maybe that's little kids, maybe that's teenagers, maybe that's grown kids, maybe that's your grandkids. But it's so hard sometimes to realize that just like you'd have those things in your life, and you're asking for the patience of God and the patience of other people, they need those things too. Maybe for you right now, you have a teenager who's questioning their faith. I would actually say that's a good thing. We know it's going to happen developmentally, and it's so much better that they ask good questions while they live with you rather than waiting for your influence to be miles or even states away. If you are an influencer in the life of a teenager, a parent, a small group leader, an aunt, an uncle, a close friend, if you have teenagers in your life and you're trying to navigate some of these questions, I would really highly recommend a book called 3 Big Questions That Change Every Teenager. I would really recommend you to just check it out. If you want to find a link to it or more information, you can go to the weekend resources section of ehills.org/weekend. But it will walk you through 3 of the most foundational questions that oftentimes the other ones that pop up actually are all about. But I wonder, have you ever thrown a boomerang? I'm guessing not because we're not in Australia, but like you've seen one, right? Like I think kangaroos throw them. When you throw a boomerang, different ones throw differently and they come back differently, like it's a whole thing. And one of the lessons that I think we learn as we think about boomerang parenting is that all of our kids are different. And while we hope that they're going to return back to the lessons we've taught them, or we hope that things are going to work out a certain way, it's actually not up to us, and they're all a little bit different. And someone will tell you that. If you don't have kids yet, you've probably heard it a bunch of times. You've heard, like, if you ever have kids, they're all different. Or if you're a parent of one kid and you're expecting a second, like, just wait for how different they are. And you're like, whatever, stop telling me that. And then when you have a bunch of kids, and we have 4, we have a bunch of kids, you discover this. Like, it is a real thing, especially when one of them starts to color way outside the lines. Our 2-year-old is our youngest, and he is this kid for us, for sure. Like, I don't know. I'm like, is he ours? Like, how is he this different? And he's super cute, and he's fun, and we love him. But if he doesn't get his way, he will let you know that that's not okay. And so his most recent thing right now is if you set up a boundary for him, and he's not allowed to have something, and you just say, hey, buddy, my answer is no. Has you ever done that as a parent, right? Try it, it's fun. And my voice isn't raised, I say it just like that. And he will look at you and he will clench his fists and he'll lock his jaw and he'll be like, my answer is yes. And you're like, cool. I don't know what we do now, buddy, so. I think that we need these regular reminders for ourselves, right? Whether it's for our young kids, older kids, or just even kids and students that you have regular influence on. Don't give up on them. Remember this metaphor that even though you may throw the boomerang and it gets disappeared in the distance, it can still come back, and that your influence is still being used by God in their lives. Maybe for you, this means that you're going to set up a recurring calendar reminder to pray for people in your life that you feel like are lost causes. They aren't that way to God, and he doesn't want you to see them that way either. The other thing that would be really helpful is to sometimes just start open-ended conversations, especially with teenagers or grown kids that you're like, how do I start the conversation? Well, here's a way. You could just say, hey, was thinking about you this morning. How are you doing? Just ask that question. Now, don't follow that up from their response with, well, that's good because I was really questioning your decision-making as it related to that romantic relationship and the long-term decisions that you were making based on a short-term commitment. Like, don't respond with that text message, okay? Open-ended question, just let them carry the ball from there. Maybe, what are you up to this Christmas? What are you doing? What's happening in your world? Just start the conversation. You have no idea what God can do with it. Or maybe like, hey, have you seen that movie, 8-Bit Christmas, about how crazy it was to be a child in the 80s? That was my childhood. Isn't that crazy? Like, just ask an open-ended question, whatever it is for you. But don't give up. Trust the work that God is doing in them and in you. There is no situation that is so broken that God can't fix it. And there are some situations that are so broken in your life maybe that only God can fix it. And trust him that he can even do it this Christmas. And if you and I will realign our picture of what this Christmas could look like, then we can let this season bring your family hope, not hurt. You don't have to just do more damage. You don't have to try to work it out on your own. Now, the first point that we just talked about was about how as parents are key influencers in the lives of the next generation, we need to extend grace and patience, and I think we do. I started there on purpose, but the second point's really important too, and that is that this takes teachable children. And before you groan, if you are a child or a teenager in here, we are living in a moment where parents are portrayed, especially in media, especially dads, as incompetent buffoons. And while we get the chance to change those perceptions to our kids and with kids in our life every day, they are reminded multiple times a day of this stereotype. And so here's what I want to do. Parents, for you in the room, I just want you to put some invisible earmuffs on for the next few minutes. I want to talk to kids in the room and online. Kids, here's what I want to talk about. If you're a child or a student listening, we talked about the evil patterns in our world just a couple weeks ago. And this pattern to view parents poorly isn't new, but it is definitely hurting you. You get to decide how you will approach your parents, who are definitely not perfect, but they are genuinely trying. Solomon actually has some really specific advice for you and me. He says, "My son, keep your father's commandment and forsake not your mother's teaching." I know that if you're a kid or a student, you've probably heard this passage mean, like you've heard it taught, that you should just do whatever your parents say all the time without questioning, like some sort of mindless robot. And that is exactly what this passage means. You should do that. Parents, I told you to put on earmuffs not too long ago, okay? That is not what this passage means. Remember, we just talked a few minutes ago about the difference between principles and promises. That these are principles, that this talks about the direction of your life, that the direction of your and my life as kids, as students, would be that the way you and I relate to parents, to your parents, should be focused on giving them respect and the benefit of the doubt. How often does it really feel for you, though, with your parents, where you are actually assuming the worst in them and you're just trying to get away with something? That's kind of like your regular way to go. And I know what you're thinking, because I was you. You're thinking, they do that with me all the time. But can I tell you a secret? Don't tell any grown-up this, okay? If you change the way that you relate to them and start modeling respect and trust, they will get better at it too. You can help them trust you by trusting them. And I know it sounds crazy, but you should try it, because I'm guessing that even if you think life's going pretty good, there are some times that you've thought, I could probably use an adjustment to my approach. Solomon in that passage specifically calls out your father and your mother. And maybe for you, you're like, yeah, but I'm being raised by a single mom. I'm being raised by a single dad, or I'm in a blended family. And I would say that's okay. Focus on the principle. They are all in there to help you, even when they don't get it right, even when it goes sideways, even when they say that thing they shouldn't have said. Like, they genuinely care about you. And what it looks like for you to model trust and respect will go a lot further than you realize. All right, parents, earmuffs off, okay? You know the best way to help your kids. I bet you do. The best way for you to help your kids to trust you is to confess and apologize for your mistakes directly to them. This is what I mean. I don't mean, you know what, I am so sorry that I lost my temper with you, but I asked you to do it 5 times and you didn't do it any of those 5 times, and I was getting slightly more frustrated every time you didn't do it, and then there's other thing happening in my life, so like actually I'm saying sorry, but it's really your fault. Don't apologize like that, okay? Just say I'm sorry. And you know what, if there's something that you're carrying into it, be honest. Hey, there was something that happened earlier today that I really needed to have a direct conversation with about, and I didn't. And so I was already frustrated, and then when you made me frustrated, I took this stuff and I put it into my conversation with you, and I am so sorry. And the kind of hope and grace that we need from Jesus, would you give me some of that grace? Could you forgive me? I'm telling you, that will go so much further than you realize. Maybe you're coming home exhausted. Maybe you just made the wrong call. Be honest about it. Now, one of the ways that you can work together on this stuff is to carry lessons about faith beyond just the weekend, beyond, especially if you got kids in programming, beyond just kids in a different room and you in this room. There's actually an app that we make available called Parent Cue that we offer to families that helps you talk with your kids and remember the time that you have left with them so you can make it count, about the same concepts that they're learning in their environments today. You can find a link to it, download it, and check it out at ehills.org/weekend under weekend resources. If you don't have this and you have kids in your home, you should grab it. So Kids, students, you got this, right? We're gonna perfectly be teachable from now on. That'll really help our family. So I'm just gonna take your word for it. Or at least maybe this Christmas we'll try. At least this Christmas we won't assume that all we have to do is consume. We won't just ask for more and more and more and better and better and better and get angry when we don't have it. So that this season can bring your family hope, not hurt. See, this isn't just what moms and dads do. This is what boys and girls do. This is what young men do. This is what young women do. We all have a part to play in this family checkup of how we will approach this Christmas. Now, we started talking to parents and influencers, and we talked to kids and students. But lastly, we're gonna talk about something that takes all of us, and that is how you and I might be discerning families. Discerning families. This is really important because I think we all know, right? We can't just take everything that comes our way, can we? We know that not every opportunity is the right opportunity. I wonder how easy is it for us to take all the invitations and all the opportunities and just power through them? How easy is it for us to confuse a full calendar with a full life? When in actuality, sometimes we use a full calendar to cover over the fact that our life feels pretty empty. Now remember back on Vision Weekend, we talked about this idea that there are these priorities in our lives, and if we're honest about it, we all have more priorities than we do space in our life for those priorities. And so we use this metaphor of rocks, and you're like, oh no, not the rocks. We use this metaphor of rocks, and we talked about what it meant to be God-centered and family first, to let God, like sand in the jar, cover over everything in our life. That the biggest rock, our family, would go in first, and that we would only put into our lives what could actually fit. And what happens sometimes is that it becomes kind of first come, first serve, and whatever agenda items come our way, we just start filling the container up with them. And before we know it, we've said yes to some things and said no to other things that we would absolutely want to have in there, but we weren't discerning about it. We weren't intentional about it. And so what were the things that for you remember, you go, oh, this is gonna be a big deal for us. We're gonna make sure that we prioritize this in our life. And then at the end, if you remember, we all committed to something that wasn't going to make the cut. Something that we would need to remove from our lives this year so that we could focus on who and how God has called us to invest right now. For some of those things, they were good things. They were just gonna get in your way right now. For some of them, they were patterns that you've been trying to break for years. And you guys wrote them down. You wrote them down on rocks, and we had you put them out there. And things like your relationship to technology and how you focused on work and some hobbies and pursuits that didn't need to be as big a priority in your life as they had become, that you said, this year, these things are gonna take a back seat so that our family can be God-centered and family first. See, part of that family checkup weekend is for you to remember the commitment that you made to God about those. Because if you don't, it won't get better. If you don't, this Christmas is gonna leave you with some more family scars. If you don't, months from now, that cavity of your life is only going to get worse. This is a checkup opportunity to say, you know what, there were some things that I felt like God called me to do differently this year. And you know what, maybe there's a few months that's drifted. This is a chance for you to snap it back and to be able to recommit to what it means to stay focused to that calling from God for your life. Solomon actually gives a warning about this. He says, whoever troubles his own household will inherit the wind, and the fool will be servant to the wise of heart. See, there are paths available to all of us. And if we are discerning, we will watch the right opportunities kind of bubble to the surface, and we'll be able to tell the difference between what we say yes to, what we say no to, and what we say not now to. But again, how easy is it for us when we're not discerning, when we're not intentional, when we don't realize what has to stay outside the jar of our life? How easy is it for us to become overscheduled, overcommitted, exhausted, and leaving a wake of emotional pain behind us? Oftentimes, I think it comes down to different priorities that we just don't want to be honest about. For some of you, it's career advancement at the cost of your family. You never asked your family if they wanted you to get that career advancement position, that you never asked them if they were willing to pay the cost of time and schedule and moving. Maybe for you, it's the next major upgrade that you know will take a sacrifice from everyone in your home to get, but did you run that by them? Are they on board with that sacrifice, or did you just make that decision yourself? It starts with being honest, even if it's just with yourself, about why some things are making the cut and why others aren't. If we're a discerning family, if we focus on this, then there's something so hopeful for us this Christmas. But if we are undiscerning, Solomon says that we actually get nothing. The way he describes it is that we'll get the wind. And in our culture, we get sort of the double pain, right? Of the wind of culture and pressures around us that are never satisfied, that are never sure of where we should go. And we'll end up really only serving others. Maybe that's through the debt that you're buried in and you're paying other people for, that if you're not careful, you're gonna get into even more of this Christmas. Or it's the cautionary tale that your life will serve as to others. But ultimately, you'll look back and go, I wish I could have made different decisions. Today is the day you could start making those different decisions. Look, I know all this sounds harsh, but what's the alternative? We all want things this Christmas, don't we? We all have a list. Maybe for you, it's an Amazon wish list. Maybe for you, it's a list you've written down. Maybe it's just a list in your head. Maybe you just want one thing. But we all have things. When somebody asks you, what do you want for Christmas? There is an answer. Whether or not you tell them the truth, that's up to you. But we all have an answer. Can I encourage you, though? There's a question that I think would be really good for you to ask your loved ones, kind of however you define family in your life in the next day or two, as you think about how you're going to prepare for Christmas this year. And the question is this: what does our family need this Christmas? Not just the question, what do I want for Christmas? What do you want for Christmas? What does our family need this Christmas? And if you have little kids, you'll get some silly answers for sure, but you're going to get some other ones that might surprise you about the kinds of things that they want that actually you can't write a check for, you can't swipe a card for, you can't go stand in line for. Things that are going to take margin, things that are going to take you saying no to the rest so that you can say yes to the best of your family and the focus that they should have for you this Christmas. Trust me, as much as all of us want things to go back to normal, when we look at what normal means, you may choose to aim at discerning instead. Normal is unmanageable debt. Normal is families and marriages collapsing all around us. Normal is a mental health crisis that is only getting worse. Normal is crushing us because the normal of our world is designed to hurt you and designed to hurt your family. Choose discerning over the hurtful patterns of normal all around you. Let's let this season bring your family hope, not hurt. It's so important that you and I realize the implications that are sitting underneath the hood of this for us. Remember in high school, we put people kind of in different categories and buckets in our lives. You had the cool kids, the jocks, the nerds, the goth kids, and you're like, there's a whole bunch more now, I get it, right? Pretty quickly you learned in high school that the easiest path felt like picking one of those groups and just kind of sticking with it. And maybe you didn't know this, but there are those kinds of groups as adults too. And I know what you're thinking, like I haven't seen like a 40-year-old goth guy walking his dog around in my neighborhood, not the same categories. As a matter of fact, I actually think we see some of these groups show up most at this time of the year. There are the yard people, like their yard, it's like, do you think you're in a magazine every day? Like, we get it. Another leaf was on the ground. Let it go, bro. There are the yard people. There are the Christmas lights people. I do not understand why you would spend as much time or money as you do on this, but thank you very much. From my family to yours, it's amazing. There are the car people, the house people, the event people. Like you go to 10 Christmas parties this year and they were there before you at all of them and they stay after you at all of them. And you're like, do you even go home this month? Like, what are you doing? There's the party people, the kids sports people, the career people, the church people. There are those categories. And it's fine, right? If you have an interest and you're gonna pursue it this Christmas, go nuts. But make sure that you are making that decision for yourself. Make sure that you're discerning whether or not the decision and the way you're making it leaves room for your life to be God-centered and family first. Because something that I think we can all fall victims to is trying to chase the dreams and expectations of others this time of the year. We try to be a whole bunch of those all at once. And the person that it really hurts is you. The people that it really hurts is your family. I remember my dad, every year when I was a kid, would tell me the gift that he was getting my mom, and it was usually something really elaborate. And as he started to hear what other people were getting, and he would see the packages amassing underneath the tree, almost always on Christmas Eve, he would go back out and buy even more so that he could sort of like keep up and make sure that he was doing enough. And I just want to free you from the pressure of trying to keep up this year. It's exhausting, it's unsatisfying, and it's unnecessary. Don't try to keep up this Christmas. Remember what Solomon said? You'll never catch the wind. That's what you're chasing. And the really tragic part of doing Christmas to satisfy others is that you'll quickly forget the entire point. This is referred to as the Advent season, which has helped God prepare for the coming of Jesus for 2,000 years. The next month, we should prioritize the love of God for our world, the hope that he has delivered each one of us. And because his son came for us, that this hope is still available. It's why we invite others. It's why we get involved. It's why we give to help others in all these different ways. This Christmas will bring you hope if it's about Jesus, but it can only bring you hurt when you make it about something or someone else. You get to choose. So this year, let's let Christmas be the kind of reminder that it was always designed to be. Let's remember that moment outside of an inn in the Middle East 2,000 years ago, when the God of the universe loved you and me so much, loved your unchurched neighbor so much, loved that family member who walked away a long time ago so much, that rather than asking us to get back to him on our own, he sent his only son to be born of a virgin, live a perfect life, and come back from the dead after being killed for your and my sin. Let's remember this Christmas, what it really marks, what it's really about. And let's be careful not to let the noise drown that message out. Can I pray for you? God, thank you. Thank you so much for the gift that you give each and every one of us this Christmas. The one that you gave us 2,000 years ago, the one that you prepared from before the foundations of the world. You gave us hope. You gave us the chance to be able to lean on you for eternity, to trust you with the hope of heaven for the hurts of our world. Would you help us this Christmas, God, to turn down the noise in our lives, to put some of those rocks away that are distracting us and distorting what it means to be a family that is God-centered and puts our family first. God, give us a reminder. Help this checkup to actually do something in our lives. God, for our good and for your glory. It's in Jesus' name. Amen.